Please join me in welcoming Ben English.
Farmers are the lifeblood of our nation in so many ways. They sustain us in the most fundamental sense, providing the food we need to literally keep us alive. They're also critical for to our national health more broadly, providing a key pillar of our export market and fueling our economy. But perhaps above and beyond this, farmers occupy a special, central place in the Australian psyche. Despite being one of the most urbanised countries on the planet, we Australians still like to see ourselves as pioneers, a nation of squatters working the land. For most of this, it's a combination of historical memory and an apocryphal piece of national myth-making. And yet, for many here today, it is God's honest truth. Every day, the people you write about combat the elements, work with the seasons, watch the markets and toil the earth, either figuratively or literally. If farmers are both the coalface of Australia's economic prosperity and also the face of Australia's sense of itself, then you have a solemn duty to our nation to ensure we never forget how much agriculture and the people behind it mean to our well-being. At the Daily Telegraph, we're often accused of many things, but I don't think anyone has ever accused us of being unsupportive of our farmers or of the bush more generally. On the contrary, we are outspoken champions of rural and regional New South Wales in particular, and in just a few days' time we'll be hosting our 5th Bush Summit. Moreover, this initiative, which we founded in 2019, will this year be a fully national event with summits held right across the length and breadth of the continent. We staged the Bush Summit because it became apparent to our newsroom that a catastrophe was unfolding on the other side of the divide. One of the most devastating droughts in our history was bringing the bush to its knees. It was no longer enough for us to publish stories from the comfort of our Surrey Hills office. We needed to come to the bush and come in force. And so we announced the Bush Summit to be held in Dubbo. Actually, we're just making it up as we went along. The event was rough and ready. I don't know if anyone here attended it. But it was held in this large, unadorned and quite echoey hall. To try and add to the effect, we threw a few bales of hay up on stage. But for the bush, it was actually a big moment. Wool growers, graziers, cattlemen, they came from as far as Burke and beyond, and they heard and watched the Prime Minister and the opposition leader solemnly promise that they would not desert the bush in its hour of need. Billions were committed to drought-proofing the nation. We still haven't seen a lot of it spent yet, but the very act of staging the Bush Summit had made them more accountable, and that's why we keep coming back. The Bush Summit was also a statement of our journalism. Happily, despite the digital onslaught of media business models, the Telegraph has remained committed to on-the-road reportage. And I think, ironically, that's a strategy that's giving us a point of difference in covering both Sydney and the bush. Now, I recognise we do have an enormous advantage over smaller media outlets for this sort of endeavour. Our scale and back office muscle enable us to build business models to fund that sort of journalism. I saw firsthand during my time as Townsville Bulletin editor how hard it is for independent journalists and outlets to continue to do their job. By the way, it was in North Queensland that I came to truly appreciate how many outstanding journalists are operating outside our cities. In our urban bubble, and assailed with an avalanche of media to consume, not just here but across the globe, it is easy to miss all the brilliant work that is being done every day across our nation, but outside the glare of city scrutiny. I only wish I was able to persuade a few more of the great reporters, photographers, artists and backbenchers to venture outside their patch to the big smoke. It may have been the rents. My time in Townsville also made me somewhat regret that I never spent time at a rural or regional masthead in my formative years. I could see young journos exposed to a greater variety of stories develop much faster than their city counterparts. Often they were thrown into massive yarns, murders, political scandals, that reporters at the same age at a metro could only dream of. Incidentally, if anyone here is interested in working in the Daily Telegraph, do come and see me afterwards. But let's face it, the commercial model for rural and regional journalism has been far harder hit by the digital revolution. Perhaps the only hope in that regard is the paywall. I'm not really sure, but it really is a tough predicament. Anyway, it's not just the set pieces, the big set pieces like the Bush Summit that makes the Telegraph the friend of the Australian farmer and more broadly rural and regional Australia. We promote the values of the bush: hard work, resilience and mateship. And perhaps unlike other certain urban news platforms, we also respect and appreciate what the bush does for all of us in the cities and our nation as a whole. Apart from being the breadbasket upon which we all rely at our kitchen tables, we've also recently seen the role of the farming community writ large on a global scale in recent years, with the frankly bizarre trade sanctions implemented by China on Australian primary produce. Thankfully, these artificial barriers now appear to be lifting, yet the episode revealed two things that I think speak volumes for our farming sector. The first is not just its critical importance to our economy, but the esteem in which it's held worldwide and demonstrated, albeit in a backhanded way, by our largest trading partner. Because when China wished to register in the strongest and loudest possible way its displeasure with Australia, it was our agricultural sector that it targeted. And it did so knowing that this would have not just a big economic impact, but a profoundly symbolic one as well. And the second reason is that this was essentially all for nothing. As figures revealed this week prove, Australian primary producers are so resilient, resourceful and dynamic that the net impact of China's ghost embargoes was effectively zero. Farmers found other markets that rapidly filled the void, which in itself is living proof of the value which the products you produce are held throughout the world. In other words, the fact that the rural industry was targeted was the highest global praise. And the fact that it withstood and thrived regardless is the highest proof of worth. And so, this is a fitting moment to recognise, celebrate and express gratitude for the enormous contribution that farmers make to our lives, from our bellies, as we've just experienced now, to our national economy and all the benefits that that brings to all of us. And that miracle can only be truly appreciated and therefore continue to be politically supported if the rural and regional press community continues its dogged coverage of the bush, the good, the bad and the ugly. And that's why I'm honoured to appear before you today and to salute the work that you do for our great hinterland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm going to ask a couple of questions and then ask the audience to put their questions forward to Ben as well. But first of all, I'd just like to ask you, when you're putting the Daily Telegraph together, who do you have in mind? Is there a demographic in particular you think about?
Absolutely. We've got the benefit now of data insight engines which have deep insights that in the past we sort of depended upon our so-called tummy compass for. It's called Verity. It's our internal data insights software. And it divides our readers into 14 different tribes based on geography, their net worth, their education level, and so it's sort of, in a way, it's validated a lot of what we thought we knew about our readers, but it's also surprised us. But in terms of, I guess if you could sum up who I think we're writing for, it's Middle Australia. Our consumers are right across the spectrum. In fact, one of the surprising aspects of, as I say, those Verity insights is that 20% of our readers are, they've been dubbed by our internal marketing people as first-class life, but it's basically high net worth individuals, and yet they only comprise 6% of an Australian population. So I think a lot of people, when they think of the Telegraph brand, they wouldn't necessarily imagine that we over-index in rich people. That's not who we're writing for necessarily. I just think that probably rich people see us as, some rich people see us as a haven, because we're not necessarily, we haven't gone down the woke left-wing path. We're probably right, it's probably, centre right. And so, people from all walks of life and all stratas find that appealing as a sort of, an alternative to what the overwhelmingly the media is like.
Recently, we had a story in the which made the front cover of the Telegraph. It was on the caged egg industry, and I think it's really important for people to know, if you're not in media, just how influential the Telegraph is, because it does often set the daily news agenda. And that story from a couple of weeks ago, we had text messages at 6 o'clock in the morning from the Today Show, from Sunrise, and it just kept going the rest of the day. So I assume that's not lost on you, just how influential the Telegraph is across the media platform. Yeah, no, it goes by. It's great. We were just talking about that earlier. It's an incredible thing to have that sort of cut through and leverage. I was just saying before, people pick up the phone when I ring them, and they laugh at my jokes, and they email me all the time, and I've got to keep reminding myself it's not because of my sparkling personality or my amazing wit. It's because of the chair I occupy, And the reason that is, I believe, is that the Telegraph has been, and this is definitely a Rupert Murdoch, Keith Murdoch thing going back 100 years, is just relentlessly and ruthlessly focused on its market, its audience. And so we're constantly trying to tackle the problems that occupy them, rather than defining for them what the problems should be. Yes, sure, we do lead conversations, we do set agendas, but that agenda originates with our market, if that makes sense. Absolutely. You spoke earlier about the increase in demand for digital products, and I don't know if we could say a decline in print media, but there, I guess there is a bit of a decline in print media. What do you see ahead, particularly for regional publications? Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? So I just want to go back to my time in Townsville. I got there at just the end of 2015. I was there for 2 years, and I loved every moment of it. It was the first time it was my first gig as an editor. And a couple of things that occurred to me. The first, I was there for about 2 weeks, and then I was invited to actually open a club, and I had to give the speech. I was like, "What? Why would you want to hear from me? I'm a gibberer. I'm just an editor." Why? But what it was basically what it impressed upon me was how important a masthead is to a rural regional sort of centre. And so I think it's actually one of the modern media tragedies is how how print has been devastated by the digital revolution. As much as I lean into digital, like probably 90% of my time is digital. How are we telling our stories? How are we meeting our market? How are we making our stories contextual and telling them in such a way that is relevant to a market that's for example, I think the figure is astonishing. Something like 80 to 85% of audience interactions with us, with our content, is actually what I call off-platform. So it's actually not on our website. It's not on our PDF digital print edition. It's actually on Facebook, or it's on TikTok, or it's on, it's on Insta, or Google through search. They don't come to us directly. I mean, they still do. More people are reading our content than ever before. That said, the front page is such a powerful thing, and even our reporters who are digital natives and have, probably growing up not reading a newspaper, they want to be on the front page of the newspaper. And politicians don't care as much about what happens online. They want to see it in the paper, and also our clients. And an inconvenient truth for us as we're leaning heavily into going towards this brave new digital future is that we still keep making a lot of money out of print. But you're right, there is a decline in circulation.
and we're countering that by putting up the price. Sorry about that. I think back to your question about the bush, it's not an easy one to resolve. I suspect the answer is going to be a couple of different things, which I've seen emerge in the States in particular, is that there'll need to be benefactors, people who are passionate about media who will sponsor it. So sponsorship, that will be benevolence. That will be one pathway, and the other one, I think, as I alluded to in my words, is probably a paywall, a subscription model of some sort, because you're just not going to compete with. I've seen it. You're just not going to compete with social media in the bush, and unfortunately, as much as businesses protest that they want to have a masthead in the bush, they want to have a printed product, they don't support it. Because they see, for one reason or another, they feel like they get more traction by spending their money on social or search. So it's a really tough one. I hope a lot of the Google money has flowed through, or some of the Google money has flowed through to rural regional outlets. I think that is the case. Who knows whether that's going to continue. It can't be guaranteed. It was only because Robert Thompson actually led the way and was just so relentless. And, the media in this country, more than anywhere else in the world, got together and united against the platforms, that we got a result that is almost unique in the world of getting money, getting paid for content. But yeah, it's a really tough one.
I might open to the floor now, if anybody has a question for Ben.
Ben Waters from FTI Consulting. Thanks for the talk, Ben. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence and how that impacts media. And as a body that represents rural journalism, we've seen our, membership numbers dwindle over the years. Do you see a future where we don't have journalists and it's all done by computers, or how will that play a role moving forward?
No, I think there'll always need to be humans in the loop. I'm a little bit more, a little less stressed about AI than a lot of people. Yeah, it is. I think the biggest threat of AI is that, a little bit like what happened 15 years ago when social came on the scene and search, is it'll disintermediate us, our relationship and the customer. So Google or Microsoft, for example, will just basically harvest the original journalism and reconfigure it, and then you can't tell the provenance, and so then it's harder then to actually get some to monetize that journalism. That's the threat. But where we've been heading for a long time is actually creating journalism that can't be replicated by a machine. Sure, there's data and there's stuff that can be done by a machine, but people are going to insist upon knowing that it's a human that's bringing it to them. So the challenge for us is to prove that, and I think what that'll mean is that where I see that sort of manifesting is that we'll be more personal, more direct. There'll be more video, more audio, more of us being accountable and facing up to our audience. We're certainly leaning that way, even at the Telegraph, is that there's a lot more direct relationship and fronting up and actually, speaking to a camera, all our reporters. I think in a way, one of the good aspects of this whole extraordinary era of change is that it's democratised journalism. It's made us more accountable. It's made us more honest, less arrogant, because anyone can be a journalist. How do you justify asking people to pay for it? How do you justify giving yourself a mantle as a professional journalist? Well, you've got to back that up. In fact, I don't know whether that was the case or needed to be the case 20 years ago. I don't know if that answers your question.
Pete Arkle, New South Wales Farmer CEO.
Thank you, Kathleen, and great job you've done moderating today. Nice to see you, Ben.
Cheers.
I guess looking around the world, there's sort of two ways that countries back their farmers. There's either the European US model where government delivers large amount of cash through farm bills and so on, or there are other markets where farmers are paid a decent price for what they produce. And I guess I'm interested in your perspectives on the market power of big value chain, food chain players in Australia, Ben. And I guess you touched on the ghost embargo and the fact that in net terms, at the top line, there's been very little impact. But I was in Griffith last week, where we were for the Bush Summit last year, and look, wine grape growers down there are watching grapes wilt on the vine. They're going into negotiations with winemakers with their cost of production at 30 cents, and the likes of Dan Murphy's are offering them 20 cents. And if they don't take that, then brands are off the shelf. So, yeah, just interested in your thoughts on that. Obviously, Coles and Woolworths are important to your business model directly, but I mean, how do you reconcile that as an editor of the most widely read publication in Australia?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's sort of like addressing the whole economic rationalism approach to the bush doesn't really make sense on some levels. And I think where it's a great example with the Griffith wine growers, although the main guy down there has sort of has done well by forging a very lucrative US export market, which sort of shielded him from the Chinese assault. But in terms of the market power, look, Australia, we're never going to have an economy that has a great diversity of players across the big sectors. So be that aviation or groceries, insurance, banking, they're all oligopolies, right? And with that comes outsized market power. That's where the market fails. So I'm going to sound like an agrarian socialist here. So I actually think that's where the ACCC needs to recognise that pricing power. We've seen it definitely in the dairy market, and I just think that the different rules apply, because we've also got to look at it's not just like how important is it that we have a viable agricultural sector? And so the metrics shouldn't be just whether it's purely profitable. But by the way, I'm not also talking about nationalisation or any sort of anything that would involve a greater role of the state. I just think it's basically we've got to have a sophisticated ACCC and other competition bodies to have the insights and the ability to see past just simple arguments of whether how much the price should be at a retail level. So yeah, so I think the answer in that respect is Woolworths exercising predatory power? I don't know. I don't know the specifics of that particular one, but it's certainly a question that needs to be posed, does it not? Just out of interest, has it been actually referred to the ACCC? Yeah, and no reception as yet?
Yeah, they obviously did a market study into that segment of contract grape growers 2 years back, and look, many of the issues that ACCC report identified have only played out in one direction. So, yeah, it's on the table.
Yeah, I think the jury's out on the ACCC and its new boss as to whether I think the handling of the whole ANZ Suncorp transaction has just been left a lot to be desired. So I think that there's a problem there in terms of whether there's market confidence in it. But it sounds to me like there's parallel. I actually wasn't aware of that situation. It sounds like a good Bush Summit story. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we'll definitely chase that yarn up. It sounds like a parallel with the dairy industry. It sounds like a similar sort of thing going on, right? And just out of interest, question without notice to you, do you get a sense that that we've actually properly tackled those disparities in the dairy industry?
Definitely in a much better place, and I guess the lesson is that that codes don't work until they're mandatory codes.
Yeah.
And so we're arguing the same for chicken meat, for perishable goods, wine grapes in this case. So you need the teeth to get these guys to focus.
I've created an awkward situation for myself because Woolworths is a sponsor of the Bush Summit, but look, we're a fiercely independent editorial operation. I'm sure they'll understand. But yeah, no, look, in all seriousness, with the Bush Summit, we do have sponsors, and they do, in a big way, fund what we do. But we've always been very clear to our partners that we won't shy away from stories that they might feel uncomfortable about. So yeah, but thanks for the heads up.
Thanks, Ben. It's good to see a journalist more comfortable asking questions than answering them. So, I wanted to ask you about the Darryl Anderson from Anvil Media, by the way. I wanted to ask you about your structure in-house in terms of dealing with rural and regional issues. What sort of specialist journalists? What does that look like? Not being familiar with your structure there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we don't have a specialist rural regional reporter as such. However, informally we do, in the sense that because of the Bush Summit, I think it's sort of pushed a few of our key reporters into that area. So you'd be shocked to probably learn that the Daily Telegraph, the Monday to Friday Daily Telegraph, we only really have about 26 reporters. So isn't a lot. That's because our sports department's now a separate vertical, business is a separate vertical. It's all part of the revolution. And then out of those, it's mainly the political reporters. So at State Parley, we've got 3. We've got 2 directly with the Daily Telegraph in federal Parliament. So they focus on it. But Matthew Benz is probably the other one outside that who focuses on rural and regional. It's interesting, we've got people like Buzz Rothfield, who's a sports reporter, but he's got his contact book is so amazing, and particularly outside Sydney, that he's constantly coming up with yarns about the bush that he doesn't necessarily write, but he'll pass on to us. So there's that. The other thing we've got is our News Local network. So we've got, I couldn't tell you how many, a lot. We've got a lot of journos from the Tweed down to the South Coast to Dubbo. Till recently we had someone in Wagga. I think we're going to get someone again there. And that's been great because we've kind of integrated them into our newsroom. And so we're able to use our editorial expertise and muscle to help them, because they're essentially community reporters, but we're sort of bringing a metro kind of lens and sort of resources to that. So when you put all that together, it's pretty good. So because we've kind of ingested all those northern mastheads into the Telegraph. So from Grafton, Lismore, etc., and they're all working under the Telegraph masthead now. And then as I say, like the Bush Summit, we start planning that months out, and so the stories just start flowing in. The other thing we've got is out of the Bush Summit is the Rural Advisory Committee, which are people who are invested in the bush, and they sort of feed back to us issues that are coming up or that have emerged. One that is particularly come up and become apparent is a heightened anxiety about the rollout of transition infrastructure for energy, particularly like transmission lines, wind turbines. That's something that's definitely has spiked in terms of people's concern, anger, fury in the last 12 months. So so it's sort of all that combined helps us to do a reasonable job. I wish I had more resources.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up question. Do you not think there's a place though for someone in your, whether it's a whatever you call them, regional agricultural editor?
Yeah.
It is a rather specialised field in a lot of ways, you know. And so for a lot of generalists to have a very shallow understanding,
Yeah.
though quite broad, but
Yeah.
shallow understanding.
Yeah.
Some of those key stories do actually have to run fairly deep. I wonder whether there's a place there for. I'm not putting myself forward, by the way. I've never worked in print, but
Yeah.
for a specialist to guide that in the paper.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a matter of what we can afford to do. Sounds strange coming from a Murdoch editor, right? But none of us are immune. I agree. Yeah, there probably would be. We do also benefit from the Rural Weekly Times. So we also get. We're now starting to incorporate their journalism, even though they're really Victorian sort of focused overwhelmingly, but we're increasingly getting to use that. But the answer to your question is yes. It's just a matter of if I do that, then what am I not doing? And the brutal truth is, yes, half our readership is outside Sydney, but I also need to pay the bills and ensure that we're acquiring new subscribers at the rate that's going to sustain the business. So it's just brutal content economics. I'd love to have a full-time rural writer. We have in the past had that. They just, we just haven't had it at the moment. These are really tough questions.
Steve Bignell, MLA.
Hey.
Jack Morfitt was a very good champion of the bush. But my question is actually, apart from cost of living, what are your readers' sort of top priorities?
In the bush?
No, just your general
Yeah.
readership, I suppose, trying to cut through.
It would be, okay, so housing affordability, both from a rental perspective and home ownership, is huge, and that's both here and in rural regional New South Wales. That's a big one. Health services is a big one as well, and that's actually much more so in the bush, in rural regional centres. In terms of the other one is frontline workers and the ability of frontline workers to live near where they work. That's coming up strongly. In Sydney, it's about not being shot. That's definitely a priority for all of us. So we had a front page story today which caused a bit of a stir, but we thought it was important to run it. That it's just shocking what's going on. Anyway, but yeah, that was they're the main ones I would say. But yeah, cost of living is by far and away the greatest concern, and it really is hitting the hip pocket of our readers. Our readers are mortgage. They have mortgages. I did say that we've got rich people. We do, but the bulk of our readers, that they have to watch their budgets, and it's really interesting how that's affecting the political landscape at the moment. Just only the last 3 or 4 months.
Any final questions for Ben? I have one, I have to admit. I've got to ask you, you're the editor of the Daily Telegraph. I have to ask this question. You must come across some stories about celebrities, about politicians, about sports people, and you think, wow, I'd love to print this, but we won't.
Yes.
So can you run us through the process of that and the threshold, that public interest threshold that makes you decide sometimes you do go ahead and you print that, and then everybody else prints it, and then everybody else follows after the telly?
Well, first thing I check is are they a friend of the Murdochs or any of my bosses? So that's the first thing. Second thing is I work out whether they've got anything on me. And then if I've checked those two, then happy days, just pin our ears back. But if I can't write it, it's going into the diary, and I'm building quite a compelling read at the moment. There are obviously there's public interest issues. There's interesting ones. We're increasingly getting people who are, and this is happening a lot, who are contacting me directly and asking me to take down stories. And sometimes it'll be of a young woman or a young man who's made a mistake, and they're trying to get on with their lives, but the Google search is destroying them. So my answer to that generally is that we don't do it, but maybe we can make an exception depending on the circumstances, because I do understand everyone deserves a second chance, but it is interesting how that's sort of changed things in that respect. But yeah, no, there's the paper that we can't publish is so much more interesting than the one we do. We try to put it in code, so you're going, oh, I know it's really going on there. But yeah, it's fun.
I bet.